Hi there, Mike Robinson with BlackHawk Paramotors USA. Today we have another tips and tricks. Let's say that you just purchased a brand new paramotor. It doesn't matter what brand it is. It doesn't matter if it's a used paramotor or a new paramotor. But I'm going to show you a few key things to keep an eye on. If you follow this video, your motor, if properly maintained by you, will provide good use for a long period of time. Okay, I have removed the airbox on this motor and the fuel lines, so it's easier for you to see what I will be doing. The first thing I'm going to be doing is marking. I will mark certain bolts on this motor where you can determine whether or not that bolt has loosened up or not. Keeping things torqued is very important on your paramotor. So, the first thing I'm going to show you are some of the bolts to mark and some not to mark. The first thing is the marker. This is a type of a paint or like a sealant, and it's very bright in color, and it's used or sold as a tamper-proof indicator. I prefer, honestly, like a silver nail polish where it has the little brush applicator. The silver is a little bit more incognito than perhaps this bright red. Some people use blue as well. You can use whatever color you want. But again, this is to determine whether or not that bolt or nut has moved. So you will be marking both the engine mount and the bolt. There are case bolts all around the engine. There are 4 engine mounts. On the opposite side there is a nut, and you'll need to mark that as well. It comes right into the washer that's welded inside of the rubber here. So again, remember, this metal does not go all the way through. This is a true isolator. I don't recommend urethane engine mounts. I think they make the vibration more pronounced, more finite, and a finite vibration on a high revving 2-stroke engine such as exhaust pipes, etc., does put stress on those lightweight metal components. Okay, so let's assume that we've marked all the bolts that I indicated you should mark. Now we're going to discuss the ones that you shouldn't mark, but you should keep an eye on. The first thing will be your prop bolts. 110 inch-pounds, INCH. Make sure that you have a 3/8 drive torque wrench and you torque these down to 110 inch-pounds. I don't really want you to mark them because you will be checking these and that mark is probably going to move. Particularly if you have a wood prop where you get a little bit more compression on that prop. So as you use the motor and you torque the prop, that mark is going to continue to go clockwise. Carbon fiber doesn't really compress. However, if you're using a wood prop, it will compress. So when you mark these, that's always going to continually change. So I wouldn't mark these, but do check them. And remember, inch-pounds. This is your cylinder head. The torque of these 4 nuts is 125 pounds on the 125 and 185 pounds on a Talon 190 or a Moster. Again, what I'm trying to explain to you works on every paramotor out there. So, overnight cold torque. 125 inch-pounds on the 125, as I mentioned, 180 on the Moster, the Talon 190. You do not need to mark these bolts because they will be changing. But that is something that, for me, I do it every 2 or 3 tanks of fuel. I will go ahead and retorque these. Initially, I'll retorque them at 1 full tank of fuel, 3 tanks of fuel, 7 tanks of fuel. By then, the O-ring is seated and the base gasket is seated. Remember, these 4 studs are really seating 2 gasket surfaces, the head to the cylinder and the cylinder to the case. So you do have 2 gasket surfaces that are being compressed. Keep an eye on that. Okay, well, with HE or BlackHawk, we utilize these aircraft grade stop nuts, which are metal. There's no nylon in them because, as you know, the exhaust gets very hot and the nylon would melt. And we use a spring. The spring is encapsulated, so to speak, by a bolt. This type of connection is, in my opinion, the best thing to have. Because if anything were to break, which it's not, it's contained. So some motors utilize a loop and a hardened spring to another loop. The problem with those is that a hardened spring is, just like I said, it's harder than the loop material, so it will eventually start to pull through that loop material. Also with hardened springs, they vibrate, and after a period of time that spring can break and go into your prop. The proper thing to do with those is put safety wire through them and fill them with silicone, or you can use the 3-time shrink tubing. That works well. Keep an eye on those little loops that the string is stretched to and held on to. If it's starting to pull through slightly, just put a tack weld on it. That's all you really need to do, and that loop will be fully repaired. But do keep an eye out for that spring pulling through the loop. These, I don't want you to over tighten them. You do not want to bend either one of these plates. This is simply to hold the junction of the manifold and the exhaust pipe together. So don't tighten them so much that you're bending these. As with all of our motors come with 2-piece pipes. So you have another one here. There will be 6 bolts and 6 springs and 6 nuts. So do periodically inspect them. Next you'll see the 2 studs, 1, 2, for the exhaust manifold to the cylinder head. I do want you to mark those with paint. You do not need to torque these down to any specific torque other than they need to be good and snug, and then mark them with the paint. I don't like putting too much pressure on a stud in the hottest portion of the motor, which is the exhaust. This might be a little difficult to see, but we have a connection point on the silencer and one on the exhaust pipe itself. We take a cable through there with a clamp. This keeps the silencer from completely falling off. Granted, if the silencer falls off, more than likely it's going to get into your prop. So make sure that this connection is good. If another manufacturer doesn't have those connections, you can make one. You simply make a little tab and rivet it to the silencer, and you can find a way to secure it to the exhaust pipe. But again, this is something you really want to pull on and check. Make sure it's not frayed or coming apart in any way. The next thing to keep a good inspection of is this bracket. It's stainless steel. They're quite thick. However, remember, vibration. And the most vibration on the motor is through the exhaust. So where it's crimped here or bent is where there's a possibility of them cracking. Keep an eye on that. Look for any type of distortion or any type of cracking. If you see any, either take it to a stainless steel welder and have them put a nice bead across it. TIG welder would be better because of the thickness of this material. Or just call your manufacturer and they will send you a new bracket, and I would typically get a new rubber sleeve as well. The bolt, do mark this with paint. You don't want that bolt coming off. There's a bolt here and the nut is on the back side here. So mark both of them. You can check this for snugness for sure. By the way, here's your lower engine mount, and I would be marking that as well. Belt. Belts are really easy. You can follow the manufacturer's recommendations for tightening your belt, but again, you want to check your belt. I always look for about an 1/8 inch of play. After you've tightened it a few times, you'll realize what that is, and tightening that belt, adjusting that belt will be quite easy. So as I mentioned earlier, what we're doing is we're just covering the things that you should really keep a good eye on. These are things that can go wrong on every paramotor. Again, it doesn't matter the manufacturer. Keep track of this stuff. Keep an eye on it. Keep your paramotor clean. Anytime you clean your paramotor, you might notice that zip tie that broke, or a wire that's getting too close to the exhaust, etc. So to continue on, the net. Nets are very, very important. Keep this net very tight. I mean like a guitar string. We are now utilizing the 2 lines to tighten the net. So you have roughly 10 inches in between each one. This net can get very, very tight. Again, doesn't matter what paramotor, make sure that net is as tight as possible. Not only does it help keep anything from possibly getting in, but as this is tightened, this helps with the structural integrity. It creates like a diaphragm on your frame, and less stress is put on your hoop by your glider lines, for example, when you're launching. I purposely left the airbox off last. Airboxes are often a source of frustration, source of damage to your prop and even your cage. Most of them are secured in some way, shape, or form by a zip tie or some other bracket. It's very important to inspect this zip tie. I just replace mine. You might even want to double them up. If one fails, you've got the other for backup. If this fails, then often the airbox can turn and possibly hit your prop. So again, inspect that the holes here are not pulling through the airbox through wear. Make sure your zip tie is in great condition. And when the clamp is on, make sure that that clamp is tight. Again, these are things that you should be checking visually, and that means taking a firm look at it and making sure that it's good. Some people look at their paramotor like this. It's not how you do it. You have to physically look and inspect everything clearly. If you follow this protocol, you'll have far less problems. I realize that the video is kind of long, you guys, but really pay attention to all of this stuff. Straps are another thing to think about. Make sure that your straps are tied through and secured. They can't get back into your propeller. This is the fuel tank strap, and this is the strap that tightens the net. I've left it long and not tied it off, but you can see that that strap will connect with that prop. Pretty expensive prop. And downtime. That's what we all try to avoid. We're all very busy, and when we get a chance to fly, we want to do just that. We want to go fly. So the things that I'm explaining to you will keep that downtime to a minimum and that smile to a maximum. Okay, now I've showed you what bolts to mark and what bolts not to mark. I'm just going to show you how to mark them. Lay a little bead right across there, like so. That's all there is to it. Again, I prefer fingernail polish, but you can buy this stuff specifically. It's a red tamper-proof indicator. Okay, so you notice here I've marked both the case and the steel lock nut. So that's how you indicate whether that seal has been broken, or obviously if that nut or bolt is backing off. Here's the engine mount. So I hope this video has helped you, and like I said repeatedly throughout the video, follow this protocol and you'll have far less issues with any paramotor that you buy, whether it be used or it be new. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to call BlackHawk Paramotors USA at 209-786-7899.